Hannah and Cailin, back again with Double Talk. I'm Hannah. And I'm Cailin.
It's been nearly 4 decades since Ralphie Parker nabbed his official Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle, with the compass in the stock and this thing that tells time. And finally, he's back on the big screen for another Christmas on Cleveland Street. On November 17th, fans will get the chance to reunite with Ralphie in HBO Max's A Christmas Story Christmas, which will also bring back original characters Randy, Farkus, Schwartz, and Flick, and introduce new faces too. Today on Double Talk, we're catching up with original cast member Scott Schwartz, who reprises his role as Flick in A Christmas Story Christmas, about his memories on the set of the classic film, and why the sequel will win over fans all over again. Listen in.
I could not believe when I heard that they were doing another Christmas Story movie. I mean, I don't know about you, but number one, it scares me when people try to do reboots and stuff like that of classics. And number two, I just didn't expect it. It feels like it came out of nowhere.
This was 4 years in the making. Peter did the story. He hired the writer. He hired the director. You know, there was a lot of love and care taken in doing this. Reality is, if Cobra Kai doesn't do what Cobra Kai does, this may never have happened. But now, you know, the studios understand that the fans want the people that they saw to begin with. Believe it or not, even with that, we had to audition for our parts.
That is weird. That's weird.
It was like we were in a coma for 39 years. We woke up and all of a sudden here we are again.
Well, it was like they needed to make sure you were still with it or something, right?
Yeah, there was no question, you know. I mean, you know, in my case, you do what they call a slate. You say your name and all that and the role you're trying out for. Okay, fine. And then I sat down and they sent me 2 scenes and I read them. Okay, great. And the director says to me, I watched your slate. I watched 15 seconds. That's all I needed. He goes, you're still you. I said, thanks. I sort of cheated.
How's that?
The night before I did the reading, I was on a flight from New Jersey back to LA, and I put on Christmas Story on the plane and watched the scenes with me and Schwartz so I could get the timing and everything back. And I was kind of sitting there just kind of, you know, saying it to myself so that the person next to me had no idea, you know. Artie Robb, who plays Schwartz, he and I, we haven't spent a lot of time together. But it was like right after we all, you know, he and I both got the film. Okay, fine. We went, you know, and had lunch in an Olive Garden. So we just started going back and forth, you know, to get that thing. And it was great.
Is it weird to watch yourself as a kid in the original movie? How does that feel?
Hate it.
You hate it?
You're not that guy or that person anymore, you know. I mean, that was a kid who was fun and fancy free, had no worries in life, no marriages, no divorces, none of that stuff. And it's like anybody sitting and looking at their collage of pictures from high school. It's like you don't do that very often. Once in a while, okay, fine. Or if you have a picture with mom and dad that's up on the wall, okay, you know. But this is moving pictures, video, voice, everything. And, you know, it's another guy. It's another life. It's another person.
When you think back to your time on the set, are your memories clear? What do you remember from that? And then also, when you go back and you see the movie, does it kind of jog your memory some of what was going on behind the scenes that day? Because I imagine it would be really hard to separate your experience as a kid on set with the movie. Is that true? Like what you remember from what you remember, or what you remember from when you see the movie? Yeah. So tell us about that.
I was 3 months from 15. So most people go, oh, you're like 9 or 10. I'm like, no. Fun experience to some degree. Peter and I were, you know, best friends, and, you know, Abbott Costello and whatever you want to call us, Laurel and Hardy. If not for video games, we'd have killed somebody with water balloons outside the hotel. I mean, it was cold. You know, there are movies that are great filming experiences and ones that aren't. You know, the infamous scene of the tongue on the flagpole. It was between 20 and 24 below zero.
How did they do that, by the way? The tongue. It was a suction, wasn't it? Like air suction? Yeah. That's how the legend goes.
They kind of put a tube with a suction. So if you think vacuum cleaner, where you put your hand, then it goes. Same general principle, just much smaller.
Gosh, so it's like it's freezing, and then that couldn't have been comfortable. I mean, even if your tongue wasn't actually frozen to a pole, that still must not have been a comfortable thing to film, right?
No, I mean, we had hand warmers, we had leg warmers, we had battery operated socks. I mean, and it was still freezing. It didn't make a difference. Your face is just frozen. And it was my first few days of shooting when we did that. And it was about 4 or 5 days later, and Bob Clark, the director, said, well, I got good news, I got bad news. He said, the good news is you're going to be with us a few more days. Okay. The bad news, the new lab in Toronto underdeveloped the film. So we have to go and shoot it all over again.
Oh my gosh, that scene in particular too.
That's my scene. And it was the whole day. It was everything. So the first time we did it, it was 12 and a half hours total I was out there. And the second time we cut an hour back, and it ended up being 11 and a half hours.
Well, you were an old pro by then, getting your tongue stuck.
Well, we just kind of knew what we were doing at that point. So it was like we knew, everybody kept moving because they knew.
Did you feel like you were playing yourself, or was it like when you got the lines, you kind of came to life as a new character?
You kind of come to life as a new character, but I mean, it took Bob Clark 6 months to cast it because he wanted very natural kids. I mean, everybody was booked, and I was the last one because I was in Tucson, Arizona, shooting a film called Kid Co. And I got done I was home on December 12th. And literally, I saw him 3 days later. They started shooting late January. I'm trying to remember. It was like the third week in January, getting close to February, whatever, in Cleveland. And, but he wanted natural kids, and he wasn't finding everybody. And for whatever reason, he just wasn't finding his flick. He just couldn't find it. And, the same weekend before that I finished shooting in Kid Co, the toy opened in the theaters, and Bob went to see it. So he basically told me he went to see it. He wanted to see my performance and all that because it was with Richard Pryor and Jackie Gleason and Ned Beatty. And so I did it. And he's like, all right, I want to meet this guy now. So, I came back. I was living in New Jersey where I grew up, and went into the city, and we met. And it may have been the easiest audition ever. I went in, how you doing? Nice to meet you. We talked for a couple minutes. He says, listen, I missed lunch. You want to go downstairs and have a hot dog? We were in New York City. Sure. We went downstairs. We each had a hot dog, a Knish. Okay, fine. A Yoo-hoo. All right, fine. We go back upstairs. We talked for 2 minutes. I said, do you want me to read something, get the script? He goes, no, we're good. Thanks for coming in. It was on 50th Street, my audition. My agent was on 57th. I just walked up to my agent's office just to say hi, whatever. And I walked in. She said, what did you do? I said, well, we talked for a few minutes, had a hot dog. He just called, you got the movie. The tongue of the flagpole scene, the way it's written, it says flick sticks tongue to pole. That's it. So we get there, and I said, okay, Bob, what do you want me to do? He's like, do whatever comes natural. If I hate it, I'll tell you. Okay. So I did it a couple times. And he goes, oh, it's great. But you know what? I want to try something. Give me more. Just really go outrageous. Okay, fine. Did that like twice. He goes, nope, your way is better. Do it your way. Okay. So, I mean, all of the stuff that you see, the stuck, don't leave me, come back. That was just all me ad-libbing the whole thing. He goes, I really had no idea other than, or just screaming or whatever. So when I did all this other stuff, it added that element of a kid just panicking, and it fit. Sometimes people that make movies don't always get what they should get because they're I don't want to say stubborn, but they sort of stand on what they believe. But you bring somebody else into the mix and they go, no, you got to do this. I don't say this with ego or anything else, but the new Triple Dog Dare was not in the script. And I said to them, guys, come on, really? And, there was back and forth. And finally they said, okay. And, they wanted to change it to I Quadruple Dog Dare. I'm like, no. Just keep it the way that is. Even Peter, who's Ralphie, who I love, my brother, he's like, can't you do it? I said, no. don't make me do this, bro. I love you. I don't want to see any of this. No, it's got to stay this way. And finally, he was like, okay, fine, And now the ad campaign is basically Triple Dog Dare You.
Yeah, and imagine they couldn't say that.
Well, honestly, imagine the movie without a triple
Imagine
dog
the
dare.
movie and they said quadruple dog dare.
No.
I would be like, no way.
No.
Oh, I'm glad you saved the day there.
Yeah.
You were the only hope, it seems
That's
like.
right.
So,
It wasn't about me saving the day. It was about what I knew was right for the movie.
yeah, exactly.
We lived these guys for the last 39 years, for goodness sakes. We know the characters better than anybody. We've put together backgrounds on who they are, where they came from, what happened to them. And of course, then this all happens and here's what happens to them, Now we knew that Flick's father owned a bar because that was in the original, book that Gene Shepard did. And now, of course, it turns into, well, his old man is gone and he's left him the bar and now it's Flick's Tavern.
What do you think is the most important aspect of the original that needed to be brought to the sequel?
You have to pay tribute in some form or fashion. You have the same cast, all the guys are back, and you have to sort of keep it a certain way. You can't make them other than what they really are. It's like Cobra Kai. They didn't make Daniel LaRusso a doctor. Yeah, they made him a car salesman and he's got a car dealership, but it all came from being the All Valley champion. So they were true to the characters. And that's really what it took for this one to be as good as it is. Being true to the characters. They did A Christmas Story too, which was just, it wasn't that it was a bad movie, but they weren't us. So when you have an iconic Ralphie and you turn him into somebody else, the audience is going, why? What are you doing? So even now it's so many years later in the story, it takes place in 1973 and all this, but Ralphie is Ralphie.
You've seen the full movie at the screening.
Yes.
So how does the vibe, because I know we talked about this a little bit, where when you're doing either a reboot or a sequel or something like that, it's almost like I feel like there's a pressure amongst filmmakers to kind of make it more modern, I guess, with still keeping the charm. And I feel like sometimes that backfires, but I can tell from the trailer that they kept the charm. I don't know how I can tell from the trailer, but I really can. Describe what you think about how the tone and just the vibe of the film compares to the original.
Of course, it's not the same film because you don't have Darren McGavin. You don't have the fragile. It must be Italian. You don't have that stuff. There is humor to it. There's a lot of things. It will move you emotionally. You'll laugh. You'll cry. You'll cheer. The tone is very similar to a certain extent.
Who's Flick now?
He owns Flick's Tavern, and he services the community. And Schwartz is basically something between an unemployed schlub and a guy that just doesn't pay his bar tab. They still have the thing between Flick and Schwartz.